Welcome to the deep dive.
Yep.
Today we're really getting into Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Not just the surface story, we're going deeper.
Way deeper.
We're looking at the language, Elizabeth Bennet's whole personality, and even how it connects to, well, feminism and fairy tales. Surprising, correct?
It really is. And we've got some great sources to help us unpack all that. There's an article from Atlantis Press by Huan Wang on the literary language, which is fascinating. Then a study by Wiwin Aprilia, HM, from eJournal Unmul, looking at Elizabeth Bennet through a psychological lens.
Psychology, interesting.
Yeah. And finally, a paper from UFDC Image Array that reads the novel as like a modern fairy tale and looks at the feminist themes too.
Right, so quite a mix. Our mission, then, is to pull out the most compelling bits from these analyses and hopefully give you a much richer take on this classic.
Exactly. Whether you know it inside out or are just curious, you should find something new here.
Okay, let's dive in. How about we start with the language itself, Austen's writing?
Good place to start. That Atlantis Press article really highlights how profuse and varied her language is. Wang talks about it being, euphemistic at times, profound, funny.
And ironic. Lots of irony.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Constantly ironic. The article even uses the word theatricality. It's like reading the novel is almost like watching a play unfold through the words.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And you feel that theatricality right away, don't you? That famous first line.
It is a truth universally acknowledged.
A single man in possession of a fortune must be in want of a wife.
Yay! I mean, it sounds so official.
Exactly. But the article points out the immediate irony. Is it really a universally acknowledged truth? Probably not in the way it's stated.
Ah, right.
So you have this slightly ridiculous idea presented in this very formal, almost solemn structure. Norman Page apparently noted this contrast creates this immediate, dramatic, witty effect. That formality sets the stage,
And it's not just the big statements. The article mentions her sentence structure, too, how she uses long and short sentences. Yeah, that's a great point. Short, punchy sentences for quick action, like Elizabeth rushing in or Lydia running off. It makes the pacing feel real.
Okay, so let's circle back to the irony. It's obviously a huge part of her style.
Huge. The article even traces the idea of irony back to, ancient Greece, Socratic irony, pretending ignorance.
Right.
And then how it evolved, becoming this kind of creative principle for German romantics, reflecting the world's contradictions. And later, critics saw it as how context twists meaning.
So it's more than just being sarcastic. It's like woven into the fabric of the story.
Exactly. It's often in that gap between what characters think is true versus reality, or societal ideals versus how people actually behave. Austen uses it, along with humor and a good plot, to say really insightful things without, preaching at you.
And the whole Elizabeth and Darcy thing at the start, that's prime territory for irony.
Oh, absolutely. Their first impressions are so wrong, fueled by his pride and her prejudice. It leads to all these misunderstandings that are funny but also quite pointed.
I love Elizabeth's line after his disastrous first proposal. Something about poetry driving away love.
Yes, and that put paid to it. I wonder who discovered the power of poetry in driving away love. It's brilliantly ironic because his proposal was anything but poetic. It was arrogant.
Totally. The article also talks about the irony in how different marriages are shown.
Quite a range. And the irony really sharpens Austen's commentary. You've got Lydia and Wickham, all impulse and, scandal.
Right.
Then Charlotte and Collins, purely practical, economic. And the ideal, hopefully, is Elizabeth and Darcy, built on something real. Austen's language subtly critiques the Lydia situation and shows the tough choices women like Charlotte faced.
And Mrs. Bennet just running around trying to marry everyone off to rich guys. That's dripping with irony, too, showing the pressure.
Definitely. Now, another key thing the article mentions is dialogue, how Austen uses it. R.A. Brower apparently called it theatrical, again, how characters talk about each other.
And everyone sounds so distinct, like Mr. Collins. You know exactly who he is the moment he opens his mouth.
Oh, absolutely. Those long-winded, self-important speeches about marriage just expose how shallow and calculating he is. It's masterful characterization through dialogue.
And think about Elizabeth and Darcy's early conversations. So much tension under the surface.
Exactly. He asks these loaded questions, expecting deference because of who he is, and she just comes back with these witty replies that challenge him.
She really holds her own. Even later with Lady Catherine, that famous confrontation.
Her wit is just incredible there. But it's not just dialogue. The article also discusses Austen's use of monologue, letting us hear the character's inner thoughts.
Ah, right. Seeing inside their heads.
Yeah, it reveals their inner conflicts and how they process things. Think about when Elizabeth realizes her prejudice against Darcy after reading his letter.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful moment.
The article points out the short, fragmented sentences she uses. I. It really shows her shock, her self-awareness dawning.
And when she bumps into him at Pemberley,
Yeah.
that internal turmoil.
Yes. Shame, vexation, confusion, it's all there in her thoughts. It makes her so much more real.
And then you contrast that with someone like Mrs. Bennet.
Right. Her monologues, as the article suggests, are mostly just, well, noise, exclamations, surface-level worries. It perfectly shows her frivolous nature.
So wrapping up that first article, it really emphasizes how Austen's language skills, the irony, the dialogue, the inner thoughts, are just fundamental to creating these incredible characters and exploring human nature.
Absolutely. It's not just a story, it's how the story is told.
Okay, so we've got the brilliant language. Now let's focus on the star, Elizabeth Bennet. What does the psychological study tell us about her?
Right. The Unmull article is really interesting here. It uses Freud's concepts, the id, ego, superego, and also Florence Litauer's personality types.
Okay, Freud I know. Remind me about Litauer's types.
Sure. She has 4 main ones. Sanguine, who are the popular, cheerful, outgoing types. Melancholy, more serious, sensitive perfectionist. Choleric, the powerful, driven, independent leaders. And phlegmatic, the peaceful, easygoing, calm types.
Got it. So how does Elizabeth fit into all that?
Well, using Freud's model, the article suggests her sort of basic drives and instincts might be seen in her initial attraction to Wickham. He's charming, seems wronged.
Okay, that makes sense, like an immediate gut reaction.
No. And also her love of nature, her excitement about the trip to the lakes, her genuine delight at Pemberley's beauty. That's perhaps her id's appreciation for pleasure and life.
And the ego, her
Yep.
rational side.
That's clear in her decision-making, especially rejecting Mr. Collins. Socially, economically, it was the sensible match. But her ego, balancing desire and reality, says no based on her own judgment and feelings.
Right, she just follow the rules.
Exactly. And her superego, her conscience, her internalized morals, you see that in her concern for her sister's reputations, like worrying about Lydia and Kitty traveling, and her fundamental disapproval of Mr. Collins's character. Despite the advantages, she has standards.
So putting it all together, which of Litauer's types does the article say she is?
It concludes she's primarily choleric, the powerful type.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, they point to her being extroverted, intelligent, strong-willed, independent, but crucially, also her willingness to see and correct her own mistakes, her prejudice. That shows real strength. Plus, her optimism, bravery, love of nature, it fits that choleric profile.
That's fascinating, applying these modern psychological ideas to her. It really works, doesn't it? Shows how complex Austen made her.
It really does. She feels incredibly real, even analyzed like this centuries later.
Okay, so we have the language, the psychology. Let's shift gears again. Feminism and fairy tales. How do they connect to Pride and Prejudice?
Well, the Naledi article focuses on the feminist angle, really hammering home the power imbalance between men and women back then, feminism being about equal rights.
And the argument is that Austen, subtly perhaps, is critiquing that imbalance.
Exactly. It highlights the social asymmetry caused by things like patriarchy and primogeniture, how the Bennet girls couldn't inherit their own home, and the limits on women's choices, like not freely choosing husbands or even just walking alone like Elizabeth did. Lady Catherine's reaction shows the social judgment.
But Elizabeth does walk alone. That's part of her character, her resistance.
Precisely. Then there's the economic asymmetry. Marriage wasn't just about love. It was often about survival for women. Mr. Collins inheriting Longbourn makes that crystal clear. Mrs. Bennet's obsession makes sense in that context. Women were almost like commodities.
Yeah, that's a harsh reality. The article also mentioned education.
Right, the disparity there, too. Fewer opportunities for women, and class played a big role. Lady Catherine being shocked Elizabeth didn't have a governess shows that expectation gap.
But Elizabeth pushes back against all this, doesn't she?
Absolutely. That's where the resistance comes in.
Yeah.
Rejecting Collins is huge. Choosing affection over security. Standing up to Lady Catherine. Challenging assumptions about how women should behave. It's all quiet defiance.
Okay, so that's the feminist reading. Now, the fairy tale connection from the UFDC paper. That feels like a different angle altogether.
It does, but it's really compelling. The paper links Austen to, earlier traditions of women's storytelling, especially French literary fairy tales, suggesting there were ways for women to explore social issues.
Interesting. So what are the fairy tale elements it sees in Pride and Prejudice?
Things like the eventual happy marriages, characters gaining wisdom, Darcy acting as a kind of heroic helper saving the family honor,
Okay, I can see that.
and Wickham as the false hero, the charming deceiver. Even without literal magic, the structure has echoes.
So Austen's version of a fairy tale is cackling real-world anxieties for women of her time.
That's the argument. Financial security, finding a partner who actually respects your consent, avoiding predatory men like Wickham, and Darcy's huge fortune, £10,000 a year, is almost presented as this fantastical element, the ultimate prize.
And all the Bennet sisters getting married relatively well, despite Lydia's mess. That was a bit like a fairy tale ending, too.
The paper suggests so. Darcy's intervention is like the magic wand, fixing everything. It also talks about transformation arcs, Wickham revealed as bad, Darcy changing from proud to, well, worthy, spurred by Elizabeth's rejection. That's very fairy tale-like.
And the focus on consent, compatibility,
Yeah.
that feels maybe less common in older tales.
That's a key point the paper makes. Austen emphasizes marriages of true minds. It's not just about status, it's about connection. The contrast between Darcy learning to respect Elizabeth's no and Colin's just refusing to hear it is stark. Their intellectual sparring is part of their attraction that was a kind of fantasy Austen was writing.
It's really interesting how that connects to modern adaptations, too, like the Lizzie Bennet diaries.
Exactly. They update the themes. Financial security might mean a career now, but the need for compatibility and consent, especially around sexual behavior, is still central.
It shows how relevant Austen still is, right? Economic issues for women, consent, #MeToo. It all echoes.
Absolutely. The core anxieties and desires haven't entirely disappeared.
Wow. Okay, so pulling this all together, this deep dive really shows Pride and Prejudice is so much more than just a romance novel.
Definitely. You've got the incredible language, the deep psychology, the subtle but strong feminist critique, and this surprising layer of modern fairy tale.
And maybe the most surprising thing is how a novel known for realism connects so strongly to fairy tales and speaks to issues that still feel really current.
It's pretty amazing. Understanding these layers just deepens your appreciation, doesn't it? It makes you think about the social dynamics, the personal journeys.
It really does. It feels very relevant.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe. How has that fairy tale, finding a partner you connect with who respects you, while also achieving some kind of security, how has that quest changed, or maybe not changed, since Austen's time? What are the fantastic elements we look for or struggle against today?
That's a great question to ponder. A lot to think about.